Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
In a typical election campaign, the air is thick with numbers, or just thick. Politicians of all parties use them as ammunition to help win our votes, whether they're claiming a particular policy has helped millions of families or promising billions of pounds in spending. But increasingly, claims like these are coming in for more scrutiny. Now, to help us tell the difference between cold, hard facts and more spurious statistics, we've enlisted David Spiegelhalter, president of the Royal Statistical Society. And he's on College Green with our reporter, Emma Vardy. Emma.
Thanks, Joe. Well, of course, the old cliche says that there are lies, damn lies and statistics. So that's exactly why we need people like this. And Professor David Spiegelhalter has been taking a look at some of the claims made during the campaign and where you say we need to look a little more closely.
Thanks very much. Now let's look at net migration, an important topic, particularly for the Conservatives, and that currently is running at 250,000 last year. The latest figures, that's the number of people coming in minus the number of people going out. And but we need to take that number apart because it's really quite complicated. Among Brits, there's 60,000 more leaving the country than coming in to live. Among EU migrants, 133,000 extra coming in, but non-EU are the biggest contribution, 175,000. We add those three numbers up together to give that. Now, if we're going to aim, as the Tories say, to get below 100,000 within a certain length of time, which isn't quite clear, then, which of these are going to change? We presume that this is going to start going down. All these are going down at the moment, in fact. But in order to get to under 100,000, it's going to need more than just this to change. Either more Brits are going to have to leave, which is perhaps not the sign of a great economy, or more restrictions on non-EU migrants. And these tend to be skilled people and students who really contribute to the economy.
So this only has limited impact?
This is not the main contribution to this figure.
OK, well, let's take a look at one of the claims made by Labour.
Yeah.
The party says that inequality is growing, that the gap between the rich and the poor is widening. David, what do the numbers tell us?
This is really complicated because how do you measure inequality in a large population of people? The Office of National Statistics tend to use the Gini index, which is this really complicated formula and which has shown inequality rising through the 1980s, the Thatcher period, and then being roughly stable and then actually reducing over the last few years, actually people getting less unequal.
So that would seem to go against
It seemed to go against
claim.
that. But if we use a slightly different survey, we find the Gini index wobbling around fairly stable. And if we use a different measure, the ratio of what the richest 10% earn compared with what the poorest 10% earn, then that's actually been getting worse over the last few years. And so, unfortunately, it depends which statistic we choose to use.
Of course, we have seen a lot more fact-checking features on websites and on news programmes now. Has that made parties any more careful or any more honest about the way they present figures?
I think this is a fantastic development, and I think it has made people a bit more cautious. We've got Reality Check, Full Fact, even the Educational Data Lab, which is a completely new organisation and which took apart the claims about how much it would cost to provide free school breakfasts for everyone. And so I think this is making people a bit more cautious about what they say, particularly as we've actually seen, I think for the first time, numbers being challenged live on air.
I mean, for your average voter who may not have a handy PhD in statistics, what is the best way to tell fact from fiction?
Oh, it's very difficult indeed. I find it difficult myself. But I think one of the things is you need to be suspicious when people try to reduce very subtle, complex issues like migration and inequality to a single number. And that can be very misleading indeed.
So beware of those sweeping claims.
Beware of that single and targeting a single statistic.
OK, David, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Now let's take a look at what's been happening elsewhere on the campaign with our daily roundup. Now, you know that game where you must speak on a given subject without repetition, hesitation or deviation? Politicians, you might be surprised to find, are fairly good at it. Well, here's our first contestant, and their time starts now.
Are you getting nervous? I'm very clear that this is a crucial election.
This Theresa May appearance in the Southwest prompted the Plymouth Herald newspaper to claim it reminded them of a version of Radio 4's Just a Minute.
Stronger, more prosperous future.
She had given me absolutely nothing,
And across the whole of the United Kingdom,
wrote the reporter after the interview.
around the whole country, talking to people with that very clear message.
Turns out getting inked wasn't to be for this Tory candidate on the campaign trail. On seeing what was in the window of this tattoo parlour, Jacob Rees-Mogg remarked, "We shall have to take our business elsewhere."
Andrew, let me finish. Let me finish. You've asked a really good question.
Last night's Tim Farron versus Andrew Neil match ended in stalemate.
I want you to address this
You're doing more
point.
talking than I am.
Well, I tried to get you to answer. The question is
that's
simple,
exactly what I'm
Mr.
doing,
Farron,
Andrew.
and let me try to politely put it again.
Presenters can just never get a word in edgeways these days.
Campaign to remain in the European Union.
We got it. Great stuff.
As Nigel Farage took to the streets of Clacton in Essex today,
You better give me a leaflet.
one voter offered a few thoughts on foreign aid.
If I was to do that in my house, give next door neighbour Lily next door some money, and I'm getting into debt.
Yeah.
Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement prompted this from Jeremy Corbyn this morning.
Donald Trump's decision to pull the United States out of the Paris climate change deal is reckless and dangerous.
And why have a general election when this could all be sorted out with pistols at dawn? With less than a week to go, the Communications Union reckons it's the last chance saloon for the likes of bumbling Boris Johnson and Amber, the replacement Rudd.
Well, less than a week to go. We still have a question time debate this evening with Theresa May and Jeremy Corbyn. What advice would you have, Paul Mason, for Jeremy Corbyn?
I mean, carry on looking prime ministerial. Carry on being honest with people. People really love on the campaign trail the honesty. But I think he has to now, to go beyond where it looks like Labour is now in the high 30s, he has to begin appealing to people who voted Conservative for the last two elections.
Do you think the problem at the moment is that he is still very much appealing to his core vote and will only be piling up votes in already fairly secure Labour areas?
If you look at 50% Labour in London at the moment, that is a danger. But I also think that it's very much down to locality. It's parts of the country. I think east of the A1, it's still quite the sort of Brexit thing, the kind of UKIP thing is still there. But I think in sort of middle England constituencies, places like Broxtowe, which Labour are trying to win back off, we can't mention individual names, but places in the East Midlands that Labour are trying to win back, it's on the doorstep. What you're hearing is that the manifesto pledges, above all, it's kind of like an old vinyl record that you rediscover. We can nationalise things. You know, we can spend money on the NHS. People, baby boomers, people in their 50s and 60s, really like that. And
Except, of course, it raises the question, which Amber Rudd hammered home the other night, which is where's the magic money tree?
Well, we know where the magic money tree is. It's in the Bahamas, where Amber Rudd has two accounts.
Right,
it's,
Toby Young.
The rich know where the money of this country is. It's in their private bank accounts, in the offshore tax havens.
Right. I mean, Toby Young, this campaign has not gone well, or it hasn't gone to plan, let's put it that way, for the Tories, has it?
Well, I think the narrowing of the gap in the polls between Labour and the Conservatives actually helps the Conservatives. It helps the Conservatives for two reasons. First of all, it makes the risk of Jeremy Corbyn actually being in Downing Street next Friday real. It brings that home to people, and that'll bring out the Tory vote. Secondly, if Corbyn does do better than Ed Miliband did, not in terms of seats, but in terms of the popular vote, which is the benchmark he and his team have set themselves.
Which will be around 30%.
Around 30%. Still not great, but better than Ed Miliband. If they manage to hit that target, the chances are Corbyn will either hang on or he'll be replaced by someone very similar with the same sorts of policies. And that's good for the Tories because so long as Labour are led by Jeremy Corbyn or someone like him, the Labour Party is unelectable. So if that's what the outcome is of this general election, a large majority for Theresa May, but Jeremy Corbyn hangs on or is replaced by a clone, that's great.
And one of the problems, though, has been making the whole campaign, Toby Young, about leadership and being strong and stable has to some extent been the undoing of Theresa May and has played into Jeremy Corbyn.
Well, let's see what happens next Thursday before entering on a post-mortem. But I think when people think, who do we want negotiating on behalf of Britain in those difficult Brexit negotiations up against 27 EU leaders, they're going to choose Theresa May and not Jeremy Corbyn.
Somebody who turns up. And I think we want somebody with some moral courage, because a strong and stable leader would have signed that joint declaration between Macron, Merkel and the Italian Prime Minister last night saying we reject what Donald Trump's done. You know, I think people want a person with a moral centre to run this country, and somebody who has the courage to actually debate and answer journalists' questions.
But opposition politicians always have the advantage in that, don't they? I mean, they've got nothing to lose.
Theresa May's missed out on what, you know, Woman's Hour. She's missing out on local radio bulletin interviews. Is there something wrong with her? I think we're actually entitled to ask: Is she unwell? You know, what's wrong with her?
Are you really posing the question she's unwell?
If she's being presidential, if you want to be presidential, you need to put we need to answer why isn't she turning up to these things? What's she frightened of?
Well, you're really raising the Prime Minister's health as an issue.
I'm asking, it's a legitimate question. What is wrong with Theresa May that she can't go live on interviews?
She's doing a debate.
Let's hear it
tonight.
It's a presidential debate. They did it with Hillary Clinton. Why is it not an issue for Theresa May?
You and many other people close to Corbyn have a blind spot on this. One of the reasons many traditional Labour voters can't bring themselves to vote for a Corbyn-led Labour Party is precisely because they think he lacks a moral compass. Someone with a moral compass would not have invited representatives of the IRA to come and have tea at the House of Commons days after they tried to kill the Prime Minister of this country. Someone with a moral compass would not describe a terrorist organisation like Hamas as his friends.
What's happening?
It's the lack of a moral compass. Someone with a moral compass would not have put a wreath on the grave of one of the terrorists who murdered the Israeli athletes at the Montreal Olympic Games. He doesn't have a moral compass.
Does this go to the character of Jeremy Corbyn?
What's happening is that for the millions of people who voted Labour all their lives, people who, like me, believe that, you know, we are part of a movement that's been at the very core and fabric of this the democracy we live in. We feel utterly insulted by what you just said. And
why? Because it's not true?
Because
I feel insulted by his support for terrorists and wanting to be someone who supports terrorists is not fit to be the Prime Minister.
What you're trying to do here is smear an entire half of the UK population as terrorists, as culpable for Manchester, for example.
We're talking about the man who wants to be Prime Minister, Paul Mason. Are the claims that Toby has said, is that not true?
No, none of it is true.
What, that he didn't meet members of the IRA, didn't meet members of...
You tell me which members of the IRA he met.
If he met Jerry
Sorry,
Adam...
Sinn Féin is a party.
Well, is that not considered in some people's minds at
Jerry
the time?
Adams was on the War Council of the IRA.
And Margaret Thatcher negotiated with them.
Right.
Yeah, but not days after they tried to kill her.
Not Sinn Féin. The IRA, Margaret Thatcher negotiated with the IRA.
All right. Listen, can I just say one final thing? In terms of the manifesto, very briefly with Labour, is there a problem that Jeremy Corbyn doesn't believe some of what is in the manifesto? Personally, he has agreed to go with the collective view rather than his personal view.
Jeremy Corbyn must lead the PLP. Jeremy Corbyn will lead a government that will do Trident, that will press the button if necessary, and that will do the things that we've committed to in the
All right.
I've been getting away with it all my